Over the years, I've had a lot of people ask me to make a cigar box guitar on this channel, and I haven't wanted to because there's so many great videos out there about them. I wanted to make sure when I did one, I was actually contributing something to the art form and not just parroting the stuff that's already out there. And then I got this idea. So the following is a sketch. Decades of collecting garbage, and I don't have one single cigar box in here. But I do have some of these. I was doing a little bit of research on the internet, looking at some instruments from other parts of the world, and I was looking at an instrument from Turkey called the baglama, or saz, or sometimes baglama saz. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's an instrument I've seen before. It's like a lute, and I noticed that the frets, or at least the position markers, wrapped around the neck on the instrument. Well, that got my little brain mind worrying about how I and many other guitar players sometimes use our thumb and we wrap it around to get the lower strings on the neck, kind of like this guy who knows a little bit about guitar. So I decided I wanted to try and build something that was designed to be played with your thumb and your fingers. And while I do plan on making this maybe an extended range guitar at some point in time, starting with this smaller cigar box form seemed like a great place to begin experimenting.
Cigar box guitar, but I didn't have any cigar boxes.
So you made your own?
So I'm making a cigar box.
They're kind of easy to find.
Yep. But, you know me. Anything's the hard way.
I think you kind of wanted to do it this way. And that's why you didn't go out and buy a cigar box.
On the nose.
You wanted to put your name.
Yep. You're figuring it all out.
Of course, there's no fooling Vance Maker. He figured it out that I could have gone and gotten a cigar box relatively easily, but I wanted to make one out of Holocore doors as part of my series of instruments built from these doors. Now that I have my fake cigar box made, it's time to make the main part of the instrument, the neck. And I dug up this piece of ash that was from some big pallets that I got in a few months back. Thought that'd be a nice sturdy piece of wood to work with, and I started by squaring it up. Speaking of squaring things up, this is the square. This is a multi-tool I invented a few years back that really comes in handy for doing this type of layout work. You can find more information on it on the web at timsway.net/square. And that little plastic piece, I have a video about that as well. I've recently made that. That's open source, so you can print your own on a 3D printer, and it gives you that edge capabilities. Here I'm using the square to carefully plan out my design. Now I'm going to have 3 strings on the main neck, and then I want to have this 4th string on the second neck. And I decided that the best thing to do is to put the tuner for the 4th string down on the opposite end of the guitar. And I had to do a little bit of planning to figure out how to do that. It turned out if I remove some wood from this spot, I could then place the tuner in and still be able to run the strings down the proper way for the other 3 strings. It'll make more sense in a few minutes. On the secondary neck, I wanted it to angle down a little bit, and I messed around to figure out where I thought might be a decent angle, and I just went and ripped that on the table saw. Notice I'm using my finger swaver, another tool for sale at newperspectivemusic.com, just because I'm shilling here. And that was the angle that seemed right to me. I didn't even measure it, I just felt it. The tuners that I have for this are the kind of side mount, so I made this hole to mount the tuners into. And this is just still roughing out the shape. Again, I'm sort of sketching here. I don't really know exactly what's going to happen, and I kind of figure it out as I go along. I also intentionally did not use my CNC in the process because I wanted to do this all with traditional tools and make it, more accessible. I did use the laser to recreate the famous cigar brand label with my name in it, but that's obviously not necessary. found this piece of walnut in my wood stash here that's some local walnut. It was a cut off from something, and it was the perfect thickness to make a fingerboard and just wide enough to cut the 2 fingerboards out of. So since I'm not using my CNC, I printed out a PDF of an 18-inch guitar scale, pasted it to the piece of wood, and cut the slots by hand. I decided to do the 2 fingerboards together, then cut them so I could make sure that all of the frets were perfectly lined up, and that worked pretty good. You'll see later how I put it onto the neck, and my idea was I knew I wouldn't be able to bend the frets that sharp of a curve, but I thought I would be able to sort of seam them up in the middle so it looked like 1 fret, and since I wasn't really putting a ton of time or energy into the fit and finish of this build, it kind of came out looking bad, and I realized pretty quickly that that wasn't going to work too well. In the future, I would put some type of binding in between them and just make them individually off the instrument and then glue them on. I connected the fret slots now with the saw, but now this means that I'm cutting the slots again, and then I did a little bit of sanding to kind of fit the fingerboard into it. So then after sanding, I cleaned the fret slots out again so I could make the frets go in, and the slots got a little wide and sloppy via all this hand cutting. It's been a while since I've done them by hand, and I found as I put the frets in that they were a little bit loose. The simple solution for that is to just use a little bit of super glue in there, and that kind of just seals them right into place. I did not get real meticulous with this fret job. After doing the main fretboard, I smoothed the edges down a little bit, and then I had to clean those slots out again to add the second frets in. So next time I would fret these fingerboards off the instrument and then glue them on, like I said, with a seam in between instead of trying to wrap the fret all the way around. No frills on this CBG. I just did a real quick fret job because they did go in sloppy. They were not even. I did level them all out with a straight edge first and then clean them up a little bit. And now I'm adding the tuning pegs, getting it ready to play and string up for the first time. At this point, I'm excited to put it together and try it out. I'm really not obsessing on any details. Fretboards have 0 frets. You can see I'm just using a screw to hold the string in place there. That's a G string off of a bass guitar. And I threw some nuts in, some 1/4-20 bolts to work as bridges temporarily while I just sort of string it up and get it together.
I think part of the joy of making instruments like this is sort of just piecing it together with whatever you have on hand. It's really an upcycler's dream. I wanted to make this with as much just garbage and stuff I had laying around as possible, and so far that's all I've been doing. I had some old tuners laying around, I had some nuts and bolts and some, bits and bobs here, but I want to amplify it too. So I was digging around through my stuff and I found this broken antique phone. I have this CB microphone, so I was thinking about maybe using one of these to try and amplify it, but they seem like they might not work too good. Then I found, believe it or not, I found this, which is a piezo guitar bridge. It'd be the kind of undersaddle, you'd put it in an acoustic guitar. And I don't know, I'm just in my junk of guitar pile. So I'm going to try and cut this and see if I can solder the second one on so I can bend it around the side, connect the two, and make them, work in the 2 locations on the instrument. If that doesn't work, I'll duct tape a microphone to it. So here's how this works. There is a plate here that has the positive wire going to it, and then this base is the negative. So I wasn't really sure how these even worked, and now that I've just sort of hacked this apart, I can see. So all I need to do is I can just cut this where I want it, and I can just run a lead from this piece over to it and the other one from that, and just make sure they're insulated. It looks like there's a little insulator in there. As long as I don't lose that, it should work, and just be able to splice it and separate it an infinite distance, really.
The hacksaw was too slow, so I grabbed my giant Duresta razor blade and just used that to hack it off. But pro tip, next time tape the parts down so they don't go flying around your shop and you have to spend 10 minutes looking for them. But I was able to find them and solder them together, and that all worked perfectly fine. Normally you would run the neck through the body, but I knew I needed to have access to two sides of the neck to pluck string, so I just screwed the neck into the top of the box and then screwed the box on, and I ran the jack through into the box. And this is my first time playing it.
So I'm learning how to play this right now, and it does mess with your head a little bit. I need to spend a lot more time just noodling around with it to see what I like and don't like about it. But the one thing I'm noticing right away is that this tuner is in the wrong spot. It's just unprotected, and so I've knocked it out of tune a couple times just by leaning my hand on it. Since I have to hold it like this to sort of curl my thumb around on the top, I need something to sort of hold my hand up over that tuner. So I'm just going to maybe even just hot glue like a little something here to put my hand and my arm on. I think this idea has some merit. I'm very pleased with how this came out, even though it's a pretty ugly prototype. Obviously, there's a million things I do differently, and there's a million things I would do differently by design after sort of going through this and playing with it. But I want to sit on it a little bit longer before I go and build a second one and sort of develop the concept. I like this sort of shoulder armpit rest thing. I think it would be nice to design that in so it's something other than a couple pieces of plywood screwed on. And I like having the neck go into the box at an angle, and I haven't seen this before. I'm sure someone's done it, but I'm surprised I don't see more of it, because it makes perfect sense when you're sitting in your lap. Instead of having the neck like this, it just plays easier in your lap, and it also seems to fit into the kind of crook of my arm a little better this way. And then obviously there's all the cosmetic things that I would love to improve upon in a future one too. But before I do any of that, I want to hear what you think, what you would like to see done with this idea. If you think it's stupid, if you like it, how you would improve upon it. And if you like this sort of thing, you can always like, share, and subscribe and all that stuff, because that really helps me. And you could also go to my Patreon page, which is just patreon.com/TimSway. Some of my videos are sponsored by companies, but a lot of them, like this one, are not. And I just do this on my own time. And Patreon is a great way to help me keep the lights on in the shop and find the time to do this sort of thing. $1 a month gets you early access, as well as some kind of behind the scenes stuff that I do. So thank you very much, and be good.